Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at 15 Hours, written by Mitchell Scallon. I mentioned this writer in my Legends of the Space Marines review, wherein he wrote the short story Cover of Darkness. He's also written several different short stories, such as River Ward from the Bringers of Death book, Forever Loyal from the What Price Victory book, and Knee Deep from the Imperial Guards Omnibus Volume 1. He's also written the Descent of Angels novel for the Horus Heresy series. And he also writes for a comic series based on the Warhammer Fantasy universe. And from what I could tell, 15 Hours is his first work that's not dealing with comic books, which is evident by the very first acknowledgement in the book. To Mom and Dad, hey, look it, I done wrote my first book without pictures. So I'm just assuming this is his first non-comic magazine, whatever, piece of work. And if you couldn't tell by the cover art, this book is based on the Imperial Guard. And I really found this book to be a pretty interesting read. It follows a brand new Imperial Guard soldier, somebody who's just sworn in and who's going through boot camp. And we're seeing the life of a recruited Imperial Guard through his eyes. And at first it feels like any type of war movie or story in which we follow a character who just joined any type of military. So we do fall into a lot of the stereotype kind of characters. Like the very angry, screaming drill sergeant kind of character. The main character's best friends who usually involve the sort of like wide-eyed, innocent kind of guy who doesn't really know much about the world. The Joker character. The guy who can't really take anything seriously. And of course the character who just absolutely hates the drill sergeant. Like more than the rest of the unit. But we don't really stick around too long with this main character while he's going through boot camp. He goes through that fairly quickly in the beginning of the book. And then his unit gets shipped off into their first assignment. And then that's just when Murphy's Law activates. Because anything that could go wrong is going wrong. Because originally they're supposed to go to a planet called Saturo 7 to stop a rebellion, but something goes wrong in the administration office billions of miles away where somebody pushes the wrong button on the computer and doesn't bother rechecking. So our main character gets shipped off to a completely different planet on the other side of the galaxy. A planet whose name I'm not even going to bother pronouncing. Here you go, figure it out. And on this planet, the Imperial Guard regiment there are fighting a huge swarm of orcs. So we're seeing all these tragic events of this brand new recruit who's the main character, who's just confused and scared and has no idea what he has to do. And then he essentially has to get assimilated into this brand new guard regiment, who don't care that he's supposed to be on another planet because they're too busy fighting the orcs. And then it's there where we run into our next group of stereotype characters who become our main character's new friends, or squad mates, they're not really friends. And what you have, the serious, nerdy, smart guy character, the gentle giant, the short guy with a chip on his shoulder, and the weaselly character who you're expecting to stab you in the back. And all the while on this planet, our main character is haunted by the idea of 15 hours, which is, as it turns out, the average life expectancy of any new recruit that joins this regiment. And that's essentially the main gist of this book. I mean, yes, there is a lot of cliche characters who run through this book. In fact, almost every officer is like the kind of superior who doesn't know what they're doing, but they think they know what they're doing and they're just completely incompetent. And it's always the soldiers out on the field that know better than everybody else. And normally, I don't like it when a book has a ton of cliches. And at some points, it did kind of annoy me. But it does make the book feel a little bit comfortable because you kind of know what you're getting into. And it just gets a little bit easier to get drawn into the book, so you get to the main meat and bones of it. And I've talked to some friends and family members who've been through boot camp and are in the military, or used to be in the military. And from what I'm told, a lot of the things that happen in this book, or rather the feelings that the main character is going through throughout these events, is fairly accurate to how a lot of people feel when they're in the military and going through war and battle and such. And I think this book does a good job on representing that through the eyes of the main character. But the main problem I do have with this book, aside from the cliches, is while the main story going through the main character, I really liked and was drawn into, there is some other side stories that never really get resolved and just seem like filler. And these side stories deal with the incompetent officers and generals and commanders that I was talking about earlier. Although those stories do help flush out about what's going on with this war and the desperate situation the regiment is in, it ends up throwing in plot elements that never gets resolved at the end of the book. Because while those stories could be interesting, we don't really go too deep enough into it, and the book clearly wants to stick to the story of our main character. And when we get his conclusion of the story, which I will admit is a little bit anticlimactic. We never really find out what happens to those other stories that happen in the book. But for somebody who's brand new to the Warhammer series and wants to try to get into it, this is a pretty good book to pick up because it's an easy read, and as I mentioned, the cliches, while annoying as they are, make it a fairly comfortable book to get into. And it does show some heart and emotion into what's going on with the main character and how he sees the world through the eyes of this fresh recruit who's never been in battle before but is thrust into this really desperate situation. But if you're a hardcore Warhammer fan and you read a ton of books, this book isn't exactly an epic kind of book. But really, you don't need a book to be epic for it to be fun. And while I was wishing for a little bit more for the ending of this book, I did ultimately enjoy it. So, that's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth.